Good evening and welcome to another edition of This Is Your Life. A year in which principles went by the board. A year of incompetence. A year of mendacity. A year of violence. Who then qualifies as the man of this year? Henry Brooke, this is your life. Henry Brooke, you were born Home Secretary just 18 months ago, on Friday the 13th, July 1962. Of all the many tributes that have been paid to you for your work on behalf of your fellow man, perhaps the best known and most sincere came from Mr. Marcus Lipton, MP for Brixton.
You are the most hated man in Britain.
Henry, you had only been born Home Secretary for 6 days when... Do you remember this voice?
Henry wanted me to be the first under the new Immigration Act to be immigrated.
Yes, Henry. That was the voice of Carmen Bryan, whose only offense was to steal goods worth £2, for which you were going to deport her. Do you remember what you said to the House of Commons?
I think it would be a great act of injustice if I were to stand in the way of her returning to Jamaica.
Did you really? Anything else?
I am not prepared to look at this case again.
And for 4 days, Henry, you stood firm. Then what did you do?
I looked at the case again.
Your word, Henry, isn't very eloquent, is it? Perhaps that's why you so rarely bother to keep it. But you were going to deport her.
Yes, we were going to send her back where she came from.
And where was that?
Brixton.
But you did it all, Henry, to protect the nation's interests.
Oh, yes. My country, white and wrong.
Let's move on then now a month, Henry. Do you remember this voice?
Save me. Save me.
Yes, you have a broad back, Henry, and you turned it on Robert Sobler, the dying American to whom you refused the age-old right of political asylum.
Yes, yes. I am sure that when the full facts are revealed, you will agree that I was acting in the best interests of this country, by acting in the best interests of the United States of America.
You told the House of Commons.
Dr. Soblen is fit to travel, and I must act as I have said I will.
Alas, Henry, Dr. Soblen let you down. He took an overdose of drugs and died. But 1963 was your biggest year. It began with Georges Bidault. Your warning, défense de gate crachet, was ignored. In the House of Commons, you said...
I have no grounds for thinking that Monsieur Bidault is now in this country.
Just at the same time as he was busy recording interviews for Panorama and being photographed for the Daily Express. Then came Chief Inaharo and the growing tide of allegations that you were interfering with the course of justice. In the House of Commons on May the 23rd, Harold Wilson asked...
Would the right honourable gentleman say whether there have been any conversations between him and a learned judge?
No, sir. I know of no such conversations.
But 4 days later, you said...
I consulted the Lord Chief Justice about what had taken place in court.
You were very indignant about Mr. Wilson's allegations. You told the House of Commons that...
They cast an unwarranted slur on our judicial system.
There was no slur on the judges. The slur was on the Home Secretary.
But, Henry, you won the day. And in an interview, you summed up the whole affair.
I'd like to think that any Commonwealth country would send back to us any political prisoners we wanted.
Yes, Henry, I'm sure that if you want political prisoners, you'll get them. Miss Alice Bacon had another question for you. She wanted to know why you detained Miss Mandy Rice-Davis at London Airport and yet back in March allowed Miss Christine Keeler to flee to Spain. You told the Commons.
In the one case, Miss Rice-Davis was regarded as an essential witness. In the case of Miss Keeler, it was not considered that she was an essential witness for furtherance of the case.
Mr. Sidney Silverman rose to say...
Is the Home Secretary not overlooking the fact that the prosecution withdrew and the jury were directed to acquit on the two main charges for the sole reason that they were unable to proceed without Miss Keeler's evidence.
While Miss Rice Davis was, of course, needed to help you convict Stephen Ward. By now, Henry, events were crowding thick and fast. Of the Queen Frederica incidents in which several men were framed by having half bricks planted on them, you said,
I understand the police were wonderfully restrained.
and finally in the Commons, you summed up a year in which people were imprisoned over parking offences and jailed for waving newspapers, a year of frame-ups at Savile Row and beatings in Sheffield, with the words,
When I landed in Bermuda from New York the other day and saw the local police wearing British helmets, I knew we were in safe hands.
And so, Henry, we come to these last 2 weeks, the dying weeks of the year since your refusal to reprieve Russell Pascoe and Dennis Whitty. But of all your triumphs, Henry, the one that showed you at your best remains the case of Chief Inaharo. He got in without you noticing him, like Bedo and Lincoln Rockwell. You changed your mind, as you did with Carmen Bryan. You misled the House, as you did over Keeler and Rice Davis. And you ignored the spirit of British tradition to please another government, like Sobler. Your policy, Mr. Brooke, has been one of trial and error. Their trials, your errors. And so, on behalf of us all, and particularly of your victims, Henry Brooke, this is your life, and was theirs.
You know, it just shows, if you're Home Secretary, you can get away with murder.